Lavrov says if the parties of Geneva communique carried out what they have agreed upon, the crisis in Syria would have come to an end. Terrorist groups in Homs commit a new massacre against Al-Amiriya village and displace its people. Iran, President Najad unveils a new domestically made fighter jet. Good afternoon, this is News in English. We begin our news bulletin from Damascus, where the Secretary of the National Security Council in Iran, Saeed Jalili, started a visit to the Syrian capital, where he will meet key officials. In statements he made today after his arrival, Jalili said that his country will provide all sorts of support to Syrian people in confronting this Israeli aggression, adding that this is a hopeless attempt from Israel to revenge the Syrian people's stance, calling upon the Islamic world to try and ease the suffering of the Syrians because Syria is the front line in facing the Zionist entity. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that terrorism is unjustified in order to overthrow legitimate governments and that countries have to overcome crises through comprehensive dialogue. Lavrov's statements came in a speech at a Munich conference. The Russian foreign minister also said that if the parties of Geneva Agreement carried out what they have agreed upon, the crisis in Syria would have ended. He added that Russia supports democratic reforms and changes away from imposing any foreign dictations on the states. On the US missile field, Lavrov affirmed that Russia rejects the mentality of the Cold War. First Deputy of the Russian Duma, Ivan Milikonov, has asserted that Israel supports the mercenaries and terrorists in Syria and provides them with weapons and funding, adding that Israel's recent aggression on Syria constitutes a flagrant violation of principles of international law and the UN's Charter. For his part, chairman of the Russian-Syrian Friendship Society, Alexander Tsasakov, has expressed deep concern and condemnation of the Israeli aggression on Syria, voicing hope that the UN and the Security Council would take all necessary measures to hold Israel accountable for this blatant attack. Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri Maliki affirmed that direct foreign interference in Syria's internal affairs using weapons, funds and planning has become obvious. In an interview with Al-Mayadeen TV channel, Al-Maliki warned that the region is in danger as there is a plan to redivide it. And this plan is causing what is happening in Iraq, Syria and Egypt in order to divert them from their pivotal role in favor of a project that involves Turkey and benefits Israel primarily, while greater powers are watching. A delegation representing the General Federation of Trade Unions in Iraq paid a solidarity visit to Syria. Chairman of the Iraqi delegation, Qasim Hamoud, said that Iraq and Syria are facing the same plans, stressing that the visit is an expression of Iraqi people's complete support of Syria, referring that the conspiracy against Syria aims to make it change its principled stance. The Iraqi delegation also condemned the recent Israeli aggression against the Scientific Research Center in Jimraya. In field developments and in a new terrorist attack, a terrorist group planted an explosive charge under the car of citizen Imad Saadi in Ibn Massacre area in Damascus. Saadi was seriously wounded and taken to hospital as a result of the blast.
People were massacred. We are not sleeping anymore. We are Muslims like them. Why are they doing this to us? God protect Syria.
About 8 a.m., Imad went out to his job, and after about 50 meters away from his home, his car was bombed while he was inside it. It's such a terrorist act.
We woke up to the sound of a bombing in the Shaur area. It was an explosive device planted inside one of the man's cars. His only crime was that he loved his homeland. We denounce this explosion and we tell the terrorists that we will not stop defending Syria.
The Syrian Arab Armed Forces continued pursuing terrorist groups in Aleppo and its countryside and eliminated scores of terrorists. An official source said that an army unit targeted terrorist gatherings in the areas of Al-Aziziyya, Al-Hadar, Karasi, Khan Touman, Al-Mansura and Meir, killing scores of the terrorists and destroying their vehicles. In Aleppo city, Syrian army units carried out several qualitative operations against terrorist gatherings in Beni Zaid, Al-Ramoun and Karm al-Maysar, inflicting heavy losses upon the terrorists. Other army units targeted terrorist gatherings in the areas of Sheikh Saeed and killed scores of them. Terrorist groups perpetrated a new barbarous massacre against women, children, and the elderly in Al-Amiriya village in Homs countryside. A closer look in the following.
Al-Amiriya is on the way to Homs's villages beside the Ain al-Dananir village, where we went to see what happened in Al-Amiriya, which were attacked by terrorists who killed people, burned and destroyed the houses. We walked through the village and listened to the citizens there as we witnessed about what happened.
10
days ago, the village called the Southern Ain Hussein, which is 2 kilometers along the west, crowded with terrorists as they fired the shells against the village. There were mortar shells and they shot fire. This continued for 3 days, and they attacked the Amiriya area as they threw the citizens out of the village. They also broke into the village, and we still cannot say anything. Some of the people were kidnapped and others were wounded.
Terrorists attacked Al-Amiriya village with 14 Drushka cars, well equipped, and each can contained about 10 to 15 terrorists. They attacked the village and committed a number of massacres there. The great massacre was inside the mosque, as they slaughtered women and children and even raped the women there inside the mosque. Some of the victims are at the hospital now, and some of them still we couldn't reach their bodies.
There are terrorists from different nationalities trying to throw the citizens away, steal their properties and destroy their homes. They also attacked the Amiriya village and committed some massacres.
I am the village baker. They shot the village with mortar shells, so we left our jobs and walked away.
They are shooting us with shells and won't leave our hill.
Strangers broke into the Ain Hussein area, Tunisians, Moroccans, and others.
While we were there, a mortar shell fell in Ain al-Dananir school. Terrorists hiding in Ain Hussein shot it.
Look at the shell. We found it here while we were visiting the school. There are shells falling on the schools.
Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has unveiled the highly advanced fighter jet named Qahir 313. The new aircraft is designed and manufactured completely by Iranian experts. During the inauguration ceremony, Nejad said that developing his country's military capabilities don't pose threats to any country because they aim to develop Iran's deterrence capabilities. Nejad asserted that no one could stand in the face of his country's scientific and technological advance. For his part, Iranian Defense Minister Ahmad Wahidi said that the fighter jet enjoys great assault capabilities and it can attack targets at very low heights, avoiding radars. Thousands of Bahrainis have taken to the streets of Al-Bilad Al-Qadim village close to the capital Al-Manama in response to calls by the opposition to demonstrate till the 14th of this month, which marks the second anniversary of the beginning of protests that demand political and social reforms be made. The demonstrators raised Bahrain's flags and photos of the detainees and chanted different slogans. Opposition forces has asserted that the national move that calls for realizing Bahraini authorities have continuously turned a deaf ear to introduce political and social reforms, grant freedom of speech, and release leaders of the political move despite international calls and appeals. This is it for our news for today. More information on our website www.syriaonline.sy. After the break, Bani Kanushian brings us Syria's latest in economy. Good afternoon, this is News in English. We begin our news bulletin from Damascus, where the Secretary of the National Security Council in Iran, Saeed Jalili, started a visit. The crisis in Syria would have come to an end. Terrorist groups in Homs commit a new massacre against Al-Amiriya village and displace its people. Lavrov says if the parties of Geneva communique carried out what they have agreed upon. Iran, President Najad unveils a new domestically made fighter jet.